The check cleared at 9:14 on a Tuesday morning, and by 9:20 my son-in-law had a moving truck idling in my driveway, ready to take the house I'd built with my own two hands. He didn't knock. He just stood on my porch holding a clipboard like he was here to repossess a refrigerator, and he told me I had until noon to be out. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't slam the door. I just asked him to wait 1 minute, and I walked back inside and made a single phone call. 11 minutes later, a car pulled up to the curb, and when my daughter looked out the front window and saw who stepped out of it, she dropped her coffee mug right there on the hardwood and started to cry. But to understand why a phone call could break my whole family apart in one morning, you have to back up about 3 weeks, to the night I sat at my own kitchen table and signed away more than I ever should have. My name is Conrad Mercer. I'm 63 years old, and for 31 of those years I ran a heating and cooling business out of a cinder block shop on the east side of Columbus, Ohio, Mercer Climate. 2 trucks at first, then 6, then 11. I crawled through attics in July when it was 110 degrees up there, and I lay on my back in crawl spaces in January with ice water dripping on my neck. I built that company one furnace at a time, and I built this house the same way with my brother-in-law and 2 of my technicians over 3 summers every weekend while my wife Marion brought us sweet tea and told us where she wanted the kitchen windows so she could watch the backyard. That backyard is where we buried our dog. That kitchen is where Marion made Thanksgiving for 22 people the last good year before the cancer took her. This wasn't real estate. This was my life, framed and drywalled and paid off. Marion passed 4 years ago. After that, the house got quiet in a way I never got used to. My daughter, Bryn, was the one bright thing. She'd come by on Sundays and we'd sit on the back porch, and she'd tell me about her work. She did something with marketing for a hospital network, and for a couple of hours it almost felt like the house was breathing again. Then she met Travis, and Travis, I have to admit, was charming the way a salesman is charming. Firm handshake, looked you in the eye, called me sir and then dad before I was ready for it. He worked in what he called real estate development, which as far as I could ever tell meant he was always about to close on a deal that never quite closed. They got married 2 years ago. I paid for most of it, which is not the Ohio way. Exactly. Usually the bride's family covers the reception, and I was glad to. That part I don't regret. Marion would have wanted Bryn to have the day. What I regret started about 8 months ago, when Travis began talking to me about putting my assets to work. He'd come over for dinner and steer every conversation toward the same place. Did I know how much equity was just sitting dead in this house? Did I understand that at my age, I should be protecting myself, that if I ever got sick, a nursing home could take everything, and the only smart move was to get the house out of my name? Put it in a trust, he said. Protect it. Protect Bryn's inheritance. I'm not a stupid man. I read contracts my whole working life. But I'll tell you the thing nobody warns you about getting older alone. You get hungry for somebody to be on your side. And Travis was good at sounding like he was on my side. He brought a lawyer to the house one evening, a young guy in a nice suit who Travis introduced as a friend who's doing us a favor. They put a stack of papers in front of me at my own kitchen table, the table Marion and I bought at an estate sale in 1989, and a lawyer flipped to the signature pages with little colored tabs and typed fast and friendly. And Travis kept saying, "This just protects you, Dad. This just keeps the vultures away." I asked one real question. I asked, "So this house stays mine. I keep living here." And Travis looked me right in the eye and said, "Of course, Dad. Nothing changes. You live here the rest of your life. This is just paperwork." I signed. God help me. I signed 11 pages without reading the middle of them, because my son-in-law was smiling at me and my daughter was in the kitchen humming, and for one evening the house felt full again. What I'd actually signed was a transfer of the deed into an LLC that Travis controlled, with a clause that named him managing member, with full authority to sell, lease, or make decisions regarding occupancy. I didn't know that yet. I poured them coffee. I thought I'd done something wise. 3 weeks later, the truck was in my driveway. It started smaller than that, of course. About 10 days after I signed, Bryn stopped coming on Sundays. She'd text, busy, sorry, rain check, and I told myself she was newly married, and that's how it goes. Then Travis started showing up instead, alone, and walking through my house like an appraiser. He'd open the basement door and stand at the top of the stairs looking down at my workshop. He measured the back bedroom with one of those laser things. One time I came in from the garage and found him in Marian's sewing room. The one room I'd left exactly the way she had it, and he was taking pictures with his phone. When I asked what he was doing, he said, "Just documenting the property, for insurance." He smiled when he said it. The Tuesday it all came down, he didn't bother smiling. I was at the kitchen sink rinsing my coffee cup when I heard the diesel engine and the beep 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 of something backing into my driveway. By the time I got to the front window, there was a 26-foot rental truck nosed up to my garage and two men in work gloves leaning against it, and Travis coming up my walk with that clipboard. I opened the door before he could knock. "Morning, Dad," he said. He didn't look at me when he said it. He was reading his clipboard. "So, here's the situation. The property's been listed and we've got a cash buyer, closing's expedited, and I need the house empty and broom clean by end of week. These guys are going to start with the big stuff today. I figured I'd give you the courtesy of being here for it. I want you to understand, I didn't yell. 40 years of crawling into people's furnace rooms taught me that the man who keeps the calmest voice in the room usually owns the room. I just stood in my doorway and I said, 'Travis, this is my house.'" He sighed. Actually sighed, like I was a slow customer. "Dad, the LLC owns the house. You transferred it. We've been over this. Look, you can't keep rattling around in 4 bedrooms by yourself. It's not safe. You left the stove on twice that Bryn knows about. We found you a real nice place. It's an assisted community out in Hilliard. They've got activities, they do your meals. It's all arranged. Your deposit's paid. Honestly, you should be thanking me. The stove. I had never once left that stove on, but I understood in that moment that a story was being built around me, brick by brick, and the story was that Conrad Mercer was losing his marbles, and his loving son-in-law was stepping in to manage the burden. I felt my face go hot. I looked past him at the 2 movers who at least had the decency to look at their boots. "Where's Bryn?" I asked. "She's in the car. She didn't want to make this a whole thing." And there she was, my daughter, my one bright thing, sitting in the passenger seat of Travis's Tahoe looking down at her lap, not at me. She'd come to watch them empty her mother's house, and she couldn't even roll down the window. I'll tell you what went through my head right then, because I think it's the part people don't expect. It wasn't rage, not yet. It was a kind of cold, clean clarity, the same feeling I used to get when I'd open up a unit some other contractor had, butchered, and I could see exactly what was wrong and exactly how to fix it. Because here's what Travis didn't know. Here's what he never bothered to learn, because he thought I was just an old furnace man who'd signed where the tabs were. When Marian and I built this company and this life, I didn't do it alone, and I didn't do it without a lawyer. Her name is Gwendolyn Pruitt, and she'd been my business attorney for 26 years. She drew up every commercial contract I ever signed. She structured Mercer Climate when I incorporated. She handled Marian's estate when the cancer came, sitting with the 2 of us at this very kitchen table, and the last thing Marian ever made her promise was that she'd look after me. Gwen Pruitt is 70 years old, 5 feet nothing, and the only person I have ever watched make a banker apologize. Travis had met her exactly once, at the wedding, and afterward he'd told Bryn that the old lady lawyer was a relic, and they should use someone modern. I held up one finger to my son-in-law. "Give me 1 minute," I said, and I stepped back inside and shut the door, and I called Gwen. She answered on the second ring. "Conrad, it's early." "Gwen," I said, "Travis put the house in an LLC 3 weeks ago. There's a moving truck in my driveway and a clipboard says I've got till noon. He's telling me I signed it over." There was a pause. Then I heard her chair creak, the way it does when she leans forward, and her voice dropped about 10 degrees. "Conrad, did you sign anything in front of a notary? There was a young fella, a lawyer Travis brought. He stamped some things. Did anyone explain to you that you were giving up the deed? Travis told me nothing would change, that I'd live here the rest of my life. I asked him direct." Another creak. "Don't sign anything else. Don't move a single box. Don't agree to leave, don't argue, don't get in any vehicle. Put the kettle on if it'll keep your hands busy. I am 11 minutes from your house and I am bringing the file." And she hung up before I could answer. Here's the thing about Gwen Pruitt that Travis never figured out. 2 years ago, when Travis first started his Put Your Assets to Work campaign, I'd mentioned it to Gwen over lunch, half joking. She did not laugh. She told me that the most common way adult children, or the people married to them, strip a widowed parent is exactly this: a quiet deed transfer dressed up as estate planning. So without me thinking much of it, Gwen had done two things. She kept the original deed and my full ownership records in her own fireproof file, and she'd quietly have me sign a durable power of attorney and a properly recorded statement of intent, witnessed and notarized in her office, declaring that I had no intention of transferring my primary residence to any party, and that any such transfer should be reviewed for undue influence. She told me, "It's a seatbelt, Conrad. You'll probably never need it, but you wear it anyway." I'd forgotten all about it. Travis never knew it existed, so I put the kettle on, and while the water heated, I did something I should have done weeks before. I sat down at Marion's table with my reading glasses and I actually read the copy of the papers Travis had left me. He'd given me a folder, real generous of him, my own copy of the news. And the more I read, the colder I got, but it was a useful cold now, because I found the part where the LLC's operating agreement named Travis solo managing member with full discretionary authority, and then I found something else, tucked in an appendix the young lawyer had clearly assumed I'd never reach. A schedule of assets the LLC was to acquire. The house was on it, but so were two things that stopped my heart for a second: my retirement accounts, listed by their account numbers, and the building. The cinder block shop on the east side, Mercer Climate's property. Travis had drawn up paperwork to fold my entire life into a company he controlled, and he'd done it betting that I'd never read past the tabs. The kettle screamed, and right about then I heard a car door out front, and then Brennan's voice, sharp, surprised. "Mom's lawyer? Why is Gwen here?" And then the sound of a coffee mug hitting the floor. I came out onto the porch in time to see it. Gwen had parked her old Volvo right behind the moving truck, boxing it in, which I don't think was an accident. She was coming up the walk in a gray suit with a leather folio under her arm, moving slow and certain, and she did not so much as glance at the movers. Travis had turned to face her, and you could see him trying to find the charming version of himself and not quite locating it. "You must be the relic," Gwen said pleasantly, stopping at the bottom of the steps. "I've heard so much." "This is private family business," Travis started. "I don't know what Conrad told you, but the property's been legally transferred, and there's a closing scheduled. Mr. Dowd, Holloway." She used Travis's surname like it was a specimen on a slide. "I'm going to give you the single most valuable piece of advice you'll receive this year, free of charge. Send those two gentlemen home before they touch one box, because the moment they remove property from this house, you've converted a civil mess into something the prosecutor's office will find very interesting." Bryn had come out onto the porch now, white as the door frame, and Travis's face was doing something complicated. "There's nothing illegal about it," he said, but the salesman was gone from his voice. He signed. We had a notary. Gwen climbed the steps. She is half his size. He took a step back anyway. She opened her folio on the porch rail, slow, like she had all the time in the world, and the truth is she did, because she'd already won and she just hadn't told him yet. "Let's see what we've got," she said. 1. 11 months before the date on your deed transfer, my client executed a recorded statement of intent, notarized, witnessed, declaring he would not transfer his primary residence and that any such instrument should be examined for undue influence and fraud. That's filed with the county. It predates your paperwork. That alone is enough for a judge to freeze your sale before lunch. She turned a page. 2. The original deed and chain of title for this property have been in my custody for 4 years, along with the incorporation records for Mercer Climate. Whatever your young friend recorded, he recorded over a documented prior interest he failed to disclose. Another page. 3. And this is my favorite. I had a paralegal pull your LLC's filing this morning while I drove over. She looked up at him over her glasses. "Mr. Holloway, you listed my client's IRA and his commercial property on your schedule of assets. Do you know what that does? It moves this out of a sad probate court squabble and into a pattern: financial exploitation of an elder. In Ohio, that's a felony, and a pattern is what turns one bad document into a charge. It got very quiet on that porch. The only sound was the diesel truck idling, and then one of the movers, bless him, just turned and started walking back to the cab. Travis tried one more time. He turned to me like we were still on the same side, and he put the warmth back on. "Dad, come on. This got blown way out of proportion. I was protecting you. The trust, the assets, it's all to keep you safe, you know that. We're family." He actually reached out and put a hand on my shoulder. "Tell Gwen it's all a misunderstanding." I looked at his hand on my shoulder. Then I looked at my daughter, standing in her mother's doorway with her hands pressed over her mouth. "Bryn," I said, "did you know what was on that schedule? The retirement accounts, the shop." And here's where the morning broke open. Because Bryn shook her head and the tears came fast, and she said, "No, no, Dad, I swear. He told me it was just the house. He said you wanted to downsize, that you'd asked about assisted living, that you couldn't manage the stairs anymore. He told me you were scared of ending up in a Medicaid bed and you wanted us to handle it." She was crying so hard now she could barely get it out. "He told me you didn't want to talk to me about it because you were embarrassed. That's why I stopped coming. He said you needed space. He said..." She stopped. She looked at her husband like she'd never seen him before. "You told me Dad asked for this." "Brennan," Travis said, low, a warning. But she wasn't listening to him anymore. She was doing the same arithmetic I'd done at the kitchen table, except hers had her whole marriage in it, and you could watch the number come up wrong. She'd married a man who'd spent 2 years isolating her from her father, lying to both of them in opposite directions, so that neither would compare notes until the house was sold and the accounts were drained, and there was nothing left to do but cry in a driveway. "The stove," she said suddenly, almost to herself. "He told me you left the stove on. He told everyone that. Aunt Carol, the neighbors. He's been telling people you're..." She couldn't finish. "I have never left that stove on a day in my life," I said quietly. Gwen closed her folio. "Mr. Folio, Holloway, here's how today ends. The truck leaves now, empty. By 5 o'clock this afternoon, you will sign a voluntary rescission of every instrument you put in front of my client, dissolving the LLC and returning clear title to him, or I file for an emergency injunction this afternoon and a criminal referral Thursday morning, and I assure you the latter will be a great deal less comfortable. You have one good option, and it's the boring one. Take it." She tucked the folio back under her arm. "And move your truck. You're blocking my Volvo. I'd love to tell you Travis broke down, that there was some big scene. There wasn't. That's the part the stories on TV always get wrong. Cowards don't explode. They just deflate." He stood there a second with his jaw working, and then he muttered something about talking to my own lawyer, and he turned and walked to his Tahoe and got in and waited for the truck to back out so he could leave. He didn't say goodbye to Bryn. He didn't even look at her, and I think that was the thing that finally killed it for her, watching him drive off and leave her standing on her dead mother's porch like she was just another asset that hadn't appraised well. He signed the rescission that afternoon. Gwen made sure of it, and she made sure the criminal referral stayed in her drawer as leverage and didn't get filed, because, as she put it, a felony charge would tangle Bryn up in it too, and your daughter has suffered enough from marrying an idiot. The marriage was over inside a month. Bryn filed. Travis, it turned out, had 2 other deals that had separated other people from their money, and once one creditor started asking questions, the rest came out of the woodwork. Last I heard, he'd moved to Arizona to be charming somewhere I'd never have to see it. The house is still mine, the deed's back where it belongs, and Gwen keeps the original in her fireproof file, and this time I read every page she handed me, out loud, with my glasses on, while she nodded. Bryn comes on Sundays again. It was hard at first. There was a lot of shame in her, the kind that doesn't wash off in one conversation, and a lot of nights I lay awake wondering how I'd let a stranger walk my daughter and me into separate rooms and lock the doors. We had to learn each other again, but last Sunday she was out on the back porch where her mother used to bring us sweet tea, and she had her shoes off and her feet up on the rail. telling me about her work, and the house was breathing again. She asked me, kind of careful, if I was angry at her. I told her the truth. I told her the only thing I was angry about was the 4 years I almost lost, and that I wasn't willing to spend any more of my time being angry when I could spend it on the porch with her instead. There's one more thing, and then I'll let you go. After it was all done, I sat down with Gwen and I changed my actual estate plan, the real one, the one I should have done years ago instead of letting a son-in-law scare me into a fake one. The house goes to Bryn, free and clear when I'm gone, but I also set up something with a chunk of what Travis tried to fold into his LLC. There's a community college on the east side, not far from my old shop, that runs an HVAC certification program. Kids who can't afford a 4-year school, learning a trade that'll feed them for life, the same trade that built everything I have. I endowed a scholarship there. I put Marion's name on it, the Marion Mercer Fund, for students entering the heating and cooling trades, because I've been thinking about what an inheritance really is. But 2 years a man stood in my kitchen and told me my legacy was a pile of equity he could put to work. He was wrong, and it cost him everything. My legacy isn't the 4 walls of this house or the numbers in an account. It's the work. It's the skill in my hands that I can pass to some 19-year-old who crawl into an attic in July and do it right. It's my daughter's feet up on the porch rail on a Sunday. It's a name on a scholarship that'll outlast all of us. I almost signed all of that away because I was lonely and a man smiled at me. If you take one thing from an old furnace man, take this. The people who love you don't ask you to sign your life over to keep it safe. And the seatbelt you think you'll never need, wear it anyway. The hardest part to sit with isn't that Travis tried to take my house. It's that he almost got it. And he almost got it because I handed him the one thing he needed, my trust, signed in ink without reading the middle pages. I keep coming back to that kitchen table. A man can spend 31 years being careful with every contract he signs at work and still get walked into a corner at his own table because the corner was built out of loneliness and a son-in-law who knew how to smile. That's the cause, and the house in the driveway was just the effect catching up. I think a lot now about 3 things I almost lost, the way I almost lost everything else. The first is the simple matter of doing right by people and expecting it back. Travis treated me, my daughter, even his own creditors as assets to be moved around a board. People who live like that always lose in the end, not because the universe punishes them, but because sooner or later they run into someone they can't charm, and all the lies they told in different rooms finally meet in the hallway. Bryn married him believing he was honest. The day she learned he lied to her about me was the day the marriage really ended. Character isn't a soft thing, it's the load-bearing wall. The second is keeping your eyes open, even when you're tired and grieving and you want to believe. I almost signed my retirement and my shop into that LLC, because reading the appendix felt like distrusting family. But clear thinking is its own kind of love. Gwen taught me that years ago when she made me sign that statement of intent I thought I'd never need. She called it a seatbelt. Being smart about the people closest to you isn't cynicism. It's the price of protecting what you built. And the third is the plain stubbornness to stand in your own doorway and not move. When that truck was idling and Travis was reading off his clipboard, every part of me wanted to just get small and let it happen, the way old men are supposed to. I didn't. I held up one finger and made a call. It wasn't strength like lifting something heavy. It was the refusal to be talked out of my own life one more time. That refusal is what gave Gwen the 11 minutes she needed. So, if you're my age and you're alone and somebody's started smiling at you a little too much about your assets, hear me. Be the kind of person whose word means something and demand the same. Read the middle pages every time, even when it feels rude. And when the truck shows up in the driveway, don't get small. The people who actually love you will never ask you to sign your life away to keep it safe. I learned that on a Tuesday morning at 63, with the kettle screaming behind me. I'd just rather you learn it before the truck shows up than after.